4 o'clock. There probably will be folks that are popping in. But yeah, this is probably going to be a big session or a big populated session. Thank you for joining us. We want to give you as much time to interact with Chip and Jerry and George as possible. So the Cliff Note versions to get everybody, make sure everybody's on the same page. But we've talked with rare exception, most of you and everyone in the network, whether they're Intermetrics certified or not, got the email on Monday. So as we've talked about 2 years ago, as trusted advisors, our commitment is to be transparent. So mid-December, trusted advisors, Intermetrics, I'm gonna screw up these 3 company names. Mid-December, Intermetrics talked with us and basically said, we're severing your master distributorship. 2 years ago, when Jay brought on some operational management folks, one of their action steps was to have all of their master distributors sign a contract. The contract was pretty innocuous. Don't steal our stuff, we won't steal yours. But it had a growth clause. And when we signed it, it was no big deal. It was not an unrealistic growth clause. But based upon the pandemic, we did not achieve that. They're using that as a way to say, thank you, have a nice life. So our goal is twofold. One was to find a new partner and provide a solution for our customers, all of you on this particular call, to have a choice. We have found a new partner. It is TTI. Our objective is to give you all the information necessary to make an educated decision for your business. We believe what you're going to learn about TTI is better than what you have access through with Intermetrics. However, if you choose to keep your account, like the note said on Monday, we will absolutely, truly respect that. For a lot of reasons that you're going to learn in this call and subsequent sets of information, I think you'll find the relationship with TTI to be more robust. But we want you to make that call. We would love for as many people to move over as possible, but it's ultimately going to be up to you. As we officially aligned with TTI, I think last week, so everything's in motion to set up a transition plan. They have given Wendy and Gerard and I an opportunity to experience that onboarding process. It's pretty cool. Number one, it's pretty simple. And number two, it's very user-friendly. Our goal today, and when we were given this information, there was no opportunity to cure. It's not like, oh, by the way, you're not where you need to be, fix it in 6 months. There's also a clause in our contract that we could have legally pushed the issue, because it clearly says, decisions like this can't be made during a epidemic or a pandemic. We just didn't think that it was legally feasible. And we pretty much ethically said as a team, if they don't want us, we don't want to be a customer of theirs. That's our story. The objective of today's call, because when that happened, I immediately reached out to Jerry and then George and Chip, because they are longtime, multiple decade loyal customers of TTI. They never came with us when we aligned with Intermetrics, and they were very transparent about that. And that we said, okay, no problem. We thought it would be meaningful, since we're all very accustomed to Zoom now, to have a conversation and a Q&A to pick 3 people's brains that have been in both networks for multiple decades and really are pretty excited about the alignment with TTI. So in our preparation for this, we decided that each of the 3 gentlemen would take about 2-3 minutes to talk about their experience with TTI, or 4 minutes, whatever the case may be, and then we'll open it up to questions. So, Mr. Houston, we'll do this alphabetically. Would you just like to start us off?
Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Well, I go back to 27 and a half years ago with TTI, and I'm a little over 28 years with Trusted Advisors. So it's been a long relationship. I was the very first person to take the certification exam at TTI for DISC. It was handwritten by its founder. Very interesting. And that was the only tool at TTI. I think most of you know that TTI and Intermetrics had a relationship for a number of years. And so the Advanced Insights report and the combination of those three reports are very, very similar to TriMetrix Legacy. They're very similar. So you are looking at an easy transfer over, a little bit of different terminology perhaps, but for the most part, very, very similar tools. And in fact, I worked with Mike Myers yesterday on a project he just sold, and he was getting some input and advice about working on the assessments with his client. And so it brought back to mind how similar they are. I've always looked at trusted advisors and TTI of being from the same set of parents, because the attitude towards the people that are in their network, the way they jump up to help and support and get things done, their honesty, their integrity are in my point of view identical to each other, and so it's a pleasure to work in both these networks. We do about 40% or so of our business is with TTI. It's assessment kind of based work, and almost every process we offer, every trusted advisor process we offer to our clients has a component of assessments in it. So we love analytics. We love being able to help people understand themselves and others, and then how does that relate to leadership and so on and so on. And so it's a very strong relationship. I think you're going to find that TTI tags itself as the science of self, and they're extremely heavy into research. And so when you look at what they can offer, they are constantly doing brain research. They have a whole department set up strictly for that purpose. They are very big into validation and reliability of their assessments and tools. They're in about 115 countries, and they're in 47 languages with their tools. And you're going to see as we go along here, and I know Chip and George will have things to say about this too, you're going to see that there are other tools besides the tools that you use through trusted advisors. There's complementary tools. One of the big ones is emotional intelligence. And we have embarked at Trusted Advisors on a lot of conversation about emotional intelligence and how powerful it is. And if you're not aware of it, emotional intelligence tool, at least from TTI, was sanctioned to be able to be used in the hiring processes, which it was not in the past, but is now. And so that's important, because that becomes a bigger and bigger issue for organizations when you're dealing with their leaders. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and let my cohorts chat with you a bit, and then hopefully we'll open it up for some questions and so on.
George?
Okay, I'm on. I've been working with TTI for about 27 and a half years. Found out about TTI through Jerry Houston. And so we were involved when the Intermetrics assessment was first introduced, and Intermetrics and TTI people worked together in doing the orientation and the first certification process. That was a good relationship until it fell apart, unfortunately. The tools, most of the tools that I use, well, first of all, we do about 500 to 600 reports a year, and most of the things that I use are 360s with coaching. And the 360 with coaching allows us to do a process similar to what Marshall Goldsmith or Whit Mitchell does, and we do that around the typical trusted advisors coaching format. A few years ago, a client had a need to do job benchmarking, and I got involved with job benchmarking, and that has been a good part of the business. In addition to using it for hiring and selection, also with coaching and with individual performance, it is very productive to do the job benchmark. And often when the boss and um, key people around that position sit down with an incumbent and talk about the duties of and responsibilities of the job, it's a huge learning process on both sides. And addition to getting the knowledge and skills piece out, with the TTI benchmarking process, we're able to go in and identify the soft skills, including the capacities or the attributes, including the competencies, behaviors, and motivators. One of the important things, if we have time, we'll show this, is this was important to me at least when we thank you, Gerard. We're always concerned with trusted advisors about positive and negative and how we use that term. And one of the things that is beneficial to me is when it's talking about bias and bias intensity, the symbols are an up arrow for positive and a down arrow for negative, or positive for overvaluing and undervaluing is a down arrow. So this takes any connotations of bias plus or minus out of it. The other thing, moving down to the dials, there's 6 bias patterns that are not coachable. And that has been very important for us to know ahead of time, to identify people that we may have difficulty coaching in a particular dimension. The other feature with the biases is how intense the bias is. Obviously, a bias of 55 is not nearly as severe or nearly as entrenched thinking as a bias of 95 is. So just how biased is that person? And then a feature that was recently added are the blind spots. And in a dimension, what the blind spots, it's really a difference between 100 and the clarity score. But what percent of the person is blind or has difficulty seeing what that particular dimension is measuring. So thanks, Gerard, and move on. I mentioned about the 6 patterns that are not coachable. Another thing that has been very helpful to us in any of the development processes or in coaching is a comparison report. The comparison report happens to be a free report, but what it does is it allows a 10 or 12 page comparison of one person to another. So typically, when we coach someone or onboard someone, we do the person with who the person reports to, and also if the person is a manager or a leader of some type, who reports to. Gain insight into that subordinate and how they think and how they're similar and how they're different, what strengths each brings to the team, and how they can leverage those strengths. And the other one Jerry has referred to a number of times, and also Chip, is the team report. And I'll leave that to one of them to talk about the team's report and the value of the team's report. Another thing about TTI that was very similar to trusted advisors is the response during COVID. They had weekly sessions. They gave, I don't know, 3 or 4 different reports away for 6 or 7 months, 8 months, something like that, a long period of time. The intention of that was we could either charge for them or we could use them as a tool to go back and get in touch with their clients and nurture relationships during COVID. So they're very responsive, very supportive, and in many ways, exactly like trusted advisors. The other thing for anybody that might be interested, for the last 15, 18 years, we've had a Wednesday night Trimetrics conference call, which, and about half of the people in that group use Intermetrics or have used Intermetrics, and the other half are TTI affiliates. So anybody that's interested in that, let me know and be happy to invite you to join. Tammy?
Thank you, George. Chip?
I want to talk a little bit about the culture of the organization. You're going to hear a lot about the reports, but I've really enjoyed. I'm certainly not as long in the tooth as Jerry and George. I've only been involved with TTI for about 20 years. Gary Sorrell was the one that that recruited me, and this was long before we had instruments at TTI, or excuse me, at the former organization. And so in the first few years, I was really floundering about. I was trying to figure out what being a product of the process was, and I was really kind of lost trying to sell the TA stuff. But I found the TTI stuff as being very concrete and something that had high face validity, and was able to sell it. So about 2 years I'm into it, and I had a gig on a Friday morning with a college board, and I ordered these workbooks. This is back in the day when you actually had workbooks that you can order from TTI, and now it's everything is more virtual. But I ordered these workbooks, and I was supposed to get these Discovering Communication workbooks. And so I got them in. I ordered them. I got them in. I didn't look at them until the night before. They sent me the wrong workbooks. Shame on me for not opening up the box 2 weeks before, but here it is. I was up all night. I was cutting and pasting, and you remember on old computers what it was like to cut and paste, and then with an arthritic printer that printed like a page an hour, and then I took everything to Kinko's and finally printed up all what I thought were the workbooks, and I walked into and gave the presentation with no sleep, and they never called me back. I don't even wonder why that didn't happen. But as I was driving away, I picked up the car phone and I called and I said to TTI, I said, "Hey, listen, I don't expect you to do anything, but this is what happened." And I was talking to a woman named Maria. She doesn't work there anymore, but she was one of the customer service people. And she said, "Can you hold on for a minute?" And I said, "Yeah." So she called me back and she said, "Okay, send us the bill for Kinko's. We're going to pay it. Keep the books that you have, and we're going to send you all the correct books. And we apologize." And that just spoke volumes to me. I had a conversation with Bill Bonstetter not long after that, and that just spoke volumes to me about how the company acts and reacts. And I found that the same way over the years. I think the training's been great. I think the support for any instrument has been great, and that's why I really appreciate. I was a member of what they called the Chairman's Club for a number of years. Bill started the Chairman's Club years ago, and it was kind of a nice little perk to get together with 50 or 60 of your larger sellers and people that were recognized for having high ethics and integrity. And it's nice the way that it worked out over the years. The other thing is they do have a conference, and when things get back to normal, their conference is in Phoenix in January. which if you live in cold country or, most of the rest of the country, being in Phoenix in January was a great thing. And the one thing I love about the conference is that it gives you exposure to a whole bunch of different business types. And for me, that was really important because, as you struggle to build your business, you want to look into other ways of making money, and the selection piece, the benchmark piece that George talked about. I really didn't have any idea what I was doing until I started to talk to recruiters that use TTI, and so you just, I wouldn't have written a book if I wasn't involved in TTI, So anyway, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Jerry, George, and Chip. The fact that we could get your schedules to align for this afternoon is one miracle in and of itself. So now we're going to open it to Q&A. We've got 76, so please be patient. And to Gerard's administrative point, if you would use the raise the hand function so that we can perhaps manage this a little bit more efficiently.
Tammy, I'm going to jump in without raising my hand because I cheat and I'm a co-host. George, you asked about this, and I think it might be valuable just to show one of the screens that George shared with me that I just want to share real quick here, just so you guys have a sense about comparison of reports. This is a summary sheet that TTI creates. And what you'll see is you'll notice that the dimensional balance page in the bottom right-hand corner is very similar to what you guys have seen. A couple additional features here. The upper left box in terms of the natural and the adaptive DISC report is almost identical to what you've seen before in terms of just a summary page. Here's where your values is different in the top right corner. Instead of being up and down, they're actually left and right. And what they've done is they've put, it's a positive piece in terms of value or in terms of what they call driving forces, that if in the old world, and I'll use the yellow one here as just an easy example, what they call utility, resourceful would be if you were a 99 economic. And what happened is you were a 99 economic under Intermetrics, that was considered a positive, there's a positive to it just because it was a high number. Unfortunately, there was a 0, the other side of it, if you were a 5, you were low and it was considered, oh, well, you're not economic, but there was no, what the positive of that was. With TTI's report on the driving forces, they've turned it sideways and it's not good or bad. What it is two different ways to look at one perspective of the world. So that's a different way to look at the values report and gives it a lot more data than it used to. And in the bottom left-hand corner is something completely new. Jerry, George, or Chip, if you want to talk about it, you're more than welcome to, but our 25 of natural talents that are associated with as an additional piece to what would be the old advanced insights as an additional piece of data that you may get as a report.
Yes, and going on with that, the reason that that's important is when we look at the attributes capacity index, what we're really measuring there is capacities, the ability, the inherent ability. Just because a person has natural an inherent ability doesn't mean that person is talented or skilled or has mastered those particular 25 areas. So the competencies on the lower left are measuring how well the person is able to execute. And the comparison we often use is when we're talking about attributes or capacities, a person, think about a basketball player. A person 7 foot 2 feet, 7 feet 2 inches tall, has all the physical attributes of a basketball player. However, the person might not be at all interested in playing basketball. The person might be interested in being an artist or an engineer, or will have mastered things that are different than a basketball player would have mastered. So that's an additional insight into how well a person will function in an organization. and we can have people with relatively low capacities if they've worked and learned how to do, they're able to perform up to a certain level. The analogy that that you probably heard is, if you look at if you're up 30,000 feet and you're watching a Ferrari and a Volkswagen Beetle go up the freeway, and they come up to an incline, which one is working the hardest and which one will drop behind? Well, that's the clue that's in the capacities. Um, so you get back to the Peter principle of 50 years ago and see why those two pieces together are important to know about a person, particularly if you're thinking about moving super worker up to supervisor. Okay, George.
The other thing, Gerard, is TTI is changing the disk graphs to be more like the driving forces graphs. And the way that they talk about the highs and lows of all four behavioral styles, natural and adapted, is going to shift to the same kind of language that they're using in driving forces. So in other words, if somebody's low I, they may be picky or fussy or more skeptical, and we'll have language to talk about what that looks like, just instead of just reading the highs of each of the graphs.
Yeah, and let me add to that a little bit, because yes, the TTI is going to turn the disk graph in a horizontal position. It gets rid of that high D, low D kind of commentary, and that is valuable. But they're going to allow it to be printed. You can print it in one or the other version. You don't have to go over to the horizontal graph, but you can, or you can even print both graphs on your report. So that was very smart on their part, because they have, lots of people who are really comfortable with the vertical graph. So that's a big change. But let me give some power to that. I debriefed someone yesterday that had an 8% dominant characteristic, D characteristic, 8%. And then I think his highest characteristic, as I recall, was around 70%. So which one is stronger? Maybe in the old days, we would have said, well, the 70% is stronger. But in truth, the one that's furthest away is actually that 8% dominant characteristic. And rather than saying they're low dominance, and so that they avoid conflict, and they don't like to quickly deal with problems and challenges, take a different look at it and say they're more cautious, they're more calculating, they think things through, they don't overreact to something. So that low dominance is a real strength. And when you look at it horizontally, it changes your view. It makes you think differently about the lower scores than you might have thought about in the vertical version. So that's the power of it. And that's what I love about TTI. They're always thinking about, how do we make this better, stronger, more representative of who a person really is, or what their strengths are.
Thank you. The first question goes to Steve Terasaki.
So I have a couple questions. They're kind of linked. The first one is, when will we have a much better sense of pricing so that we can evaluate the Intermetrics pricing structure against the TTI pricing structure? I know that you've been working on that, but at some point that would help allow me to make the determination of which way to go. The second question is, what happens with certifications? Currently, Intermetrics, we have to have at least 10 advanced insights per year or something like that, if I remember correctly. Is there a similar requirement that TTI will have of people that are using the TTI tool?
Pricing will be going out by the end of this week or Monday at the latest. So you'll have that. If you want to call one of us, I know you talked to Wendy, we can help you look at how you use it. We did a case study for one of your colleagues just this week. There is not a 10 requirement, but they do have a certification requirement. I think it's every 2 years, and that can be done via a video learning platform.
Certification, they make certification very easy to get it done in your own time so that you're not having to attend a class necessarily unless you want to. It's an option. I would also suggest, and Tammy, I don't know if you've done this or not, but if someone would contact TTI from your group and ask to give a complimentary assessment, advanced insights assessment to anybody in the Trusted Advisors Network.
It's going to be part of their onboarding process, which we're setting up right now.
Perfect.
And to elaborate on Steve's question, there's going to be a window where you can become a TTI customer, not necessarily spend any money. And during that window, they will honor all of our certifications from Intermetrics. Part of the onboarding process, you'll be able to do a video-based learning process for DISC and values. We are going through that process now because we wanted to see what your customer experience would be like. I completed it over the last 2 days. So I mean, it's useful, it's beneficial, but it's not tedious.
Tammy, you reminded me of something that I found is very valuable. TTI has a process similar to what we go through for certification that we can offer to our clients. And the power of that is when you get client people certified in an organization, they become internal advocates, and you can actually set them up to do all the processing. All we have to do is invoice them once a month. All the rest they're capable of doing themselves.
Yeah.
And we have, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 people or different companies set up that way, and it's a nice ongoing revenue stream.
Thank you. Grant Tate?
Yeah, so in the Intermetrics system, we can download the base data for our group assessments, and we get a spreadsheet with 80 columns or something. Can you do the same thing for TTI? And secondly, if you can, is it the same base data?
Well, first of all, you can definitely combine data from different assessment tools in lots of configurations, and it's free. So you can put any number together. They call them wheels. So they're plotting wheels, and it's a great way to display information and where do their people fall in terms of, this is true for both the behaviors, and it's also true for the motivators. So that you can see everybody on that team, or you can see just the team leaders, or you can see just the C-suite people, or however you want to see that information. And that's very, very powerful. We use it in team type situations all of the time.
Hey, Tammy, would it be helpful if I showed the back end?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, so it'll take me a second to pull it up, but let me just pull it up.
While Chip is doing that, a couple of comments is the same person that developed the Hartman parallel form for TTI was the same person that did for Intermetrics. So they're using all of the same algorithms. And the only difference is a couple of difference in terminology, like empathetic outlook is understanding others, for example. Sense of self is self-esteem. And also the same basic sciences on the DISC and the motivators. Spranger is the motivators for both, and Marson is the behaviors for both instruments. So the data and the logarithms are very similar. Chip?
Yeah. Let's see. Tammy, could you give me the screen for a second? Let
Yeah.
me share the screen.
Yep. I got too many boxes on my screen. Hold on.
I hear that.
You are a co-host, sir.
I am. Thank you very much. So this is what the TTI backend looks like. And so let's just say that I'm going to look up a particular report. So if I want to take a look at all the reports that have been run recently, this is all the reports that one of my accounts has taken. And so when you get here, you can either click on the name or you can click on the report. So when you click on the report, it pulls up the report. If you click on the name, what it does is it gives you all the back end data, and this can be aggregated. So if you want to, with the ACI scores, which is attribute index in Intermetrics terms, if I want to see, and I'll have to reshare, if I want to see the way that this person answered, this is how they answered. This is how they placed their answers. So if you've got somebody that that you just you're in a quandary for why the results look horrible, this gives you an idea of how they value different things, both internally and externally. It also allows you to let me go back here. It also allows you to pull up, like if you want to pull up their graph or the graph pages. This is the multi-graph page. But if you want the raw data, you can get the raw data, and it lets you do that for all of the reports, all the way through the competencies, and again, it lets you see exactly how they answered. The other kind of cool thing is, and I didn't realize that when I was talking to Tammy and Gerard and Wendy and Jenna, when you get to the graphs for each of the reports, I'll get there eventually. There's a little T colon and then a number. And this is how long that person spent on that particular report. So what you can do is I think 10 minutes is about average for a DISC report. It probably takes me 3 now, but for somebody that's never seen a DISC report, it might take 10 minutes, and that's usually what I tell people. But if they're spending 30 minutes, then maybe they started and put it aside. They got a phone call, or somebody Zoomed them or whatever. Maybe they just weren't paying attention. And so if you get some weird results, you can take a look at that and have an idea, if it's weird or not. And with the Acumen capacity, or with the dimensional balance, it's the same thing. So she spent, this particular person spent 7 minutes on the attribute index, which is pretty quick for doing the Acumen, and so she didn't overthink it. If I see somebody that spent 25 minutes, that's probably an engineer that overthought it. Yeah. Yeah.
That wasn't it?
Yeah, well, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on engineers. I only have one engineering joke, and that engineering joke is, how can you tell an extroverted engineer they look at your shoes instead of their own? But anyway.
Yeah, well, mine was an engineering question, Chip, and so I guess what I was fishing for is, I have a database in an Excel spreadsheet of downloaded reports, like 89 project managers. And if I want to do 20 more project managers and TTI, then can I pop the data into the spreadsheet and do my kind of analysis? So that was where I was going with the question.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So I just talked for 10 minutes for,
Well, you answered a bunch of other people's questions that just weren't asked yet.
Thank you.
Other questions? I don't have any live hands, so.
Hey, can you do what we called attribute index. Can you run a report without the internals where you just have the external showing? Or do just external?
I haven't done that. That's a great question.
Yeah, I don't know why you want to do that, but maybe Bob, you can tell us why you want to do that.
Well, a variety of things. If you have a bigger group where you don't have control of the situation or the audience or whatever, sometimes it's easier to do internal later than upfront, or depending on the makeup of the group. I did it was actually Axiometrics, I believe was a company. I thought it was TTI. And I did this thing where I was just, they said we could get this free assessment. I did it just as a learning experience. There were about 20 of us. And when our report came out, I noticed we didn't have the internals. So at the end, I went up to the guy and I said, oh, wow, I see you didn't have the internals. So he knew that I knew the instrument. He said, oh, yeah, I would never do that in a group like this where I have, 20 people I haven't met and everything else. But I've just been in different situations where I would have liked to have used the AI with external and not the internal.
Yeah, I don't share the dimensional balance page with anybody else. So even if I'm doing a trimetrics in a group setting, I do DISC, I do driving forces, and they've got a cool thing where they combine both of them. There's 5 pages in the report that is a combination of DISC and driving forces, which I think is really brilliant. But I don't ever ask people to share. And whenever I do a debrief in a group setting, it's I talk about what's overall. The only exception to that is I run a coaching class, and we do go into that, but it's more of a one-off conversation than a conversation with the whole group.
That is exactly the way we do it also. We do not share the dimensional balance because it can be misunderstood. And you don't want that in either system, whether it's
no, I don't share it either. I just meant sometimes I would rather just have the external. But anyway, I was just.
I think the other piece of that is that the TTI reports are customizable. So you can add or subtract pages, and it's pretty easy click to be able to do that. So as Jerry mentioned and Chip mentioned, a lot of times we just delete the dimensional balance page, for example. And there's other pages that depending on the group, they're desirable to delete or desirable to bring other things in.
Thank you.
Next we have Bertha, and then following Bertha will be the Stinsons.
Yes, is the report, can a client take the report in multiple languages? Is it available specifically in Spanish? And then can it also be downloaded?
Yes.
Yes, it's available in 3 different Chinese languages. I think 60 or 70 languages altogether.
There are, it depends on which report. So you need to get, I always check, for instance, I can do a behavioral report. I'm working with a customer in Thailand, and I just called TTI just to say, well, I don't think you do a Thai report. And he's, oh yes, we do. But only the behaviors, not the rest of it. And so, and when they say do, that means that they can take the input document, the assessment in their own language, and you can print the output in their language. And also, of course, just by going into your IDS system, your control system, you can switch it back to English. So it's pretty flexible, but you have to, anytime you're going to do that, I strongly recommend you check directly with the support analyst at TTI to make sure that language that you want is available. Spanish is absolutely available as one of the strongest languages that's available.
Thank you.
And one thing we often find with people that are low, particularly on the Hartman, English may not be their native language. And they process the information somewhat different, and we've had them go back and retake it in their native language, and it makes a big difference.
Mhm.
So it's one of the questions we ask when we see there is low reliability scores. Is English your native language? One of the first questions we ask.
Thank you. The Stinsons are up.
I just had a question, if you would please, and Wendy and I talked about this on the phone call, the difference in how you pay for stuff with Intermetrics and how you pay for stuff with TTI. Because I think that's kind of important to know too.
We pay for TTI the same way we pay for trusted advisors. There's a credit card on file, and it's paid through that credit card. That is the way that we work with them, and you're set into a pricing level based on your volume, which they'll blanket you in, I'm sure, because they don't have history with you. And this year, and another thing that talks about their character is because of COVID, they didn't require anybody to necessarily hit their pricing level, because some people were selling and some people were not selling assessments, depending on what their client base was like.
Right.
So they're very thoughtful in that way. It's not all about the almighty dollar. There's more to it than that.
We
Basically, if you buy by report, you don't have to buy a bank of credits. You're buying by report with TTI.
right,
And they don't have, so that's the comparison. Instead of buying a bank of credits and buying a chunk, you're buying by report. They
right,
don't have a direct crossover to the unlimited. And for those of you who are unlimited, the pricing that the level that we're getting you all at, we did a case study with another affiliate just this week. He is on unlimited, and basically there was a $70 variance when we looked at what they did in 2020 if they would have done that same activity with TTI. So it's not going to be exactly what you're used to, but it's incredibly comparable. So that's why I said to Steve's question, if you want to do an analysis, literally what you did in 2020 and what that would have looked like under TTI, we can, until February 28th, we can go in the back of your Intermetrics account and create that analysis. But you'll have hard copy pricing, like I said, by the end of the week. But the pricing is a little confusing. It took us a while to learn it. So I really recommend, if you're trying to make a business decision on the financial piece, is have us help you do that analysis.
The other thing with TTI, as we've mentioned, as we talked, there are some things that are free, and this probably makes a big difference when you would compare this with the Intermetrics pricing. For example, I mentioned the comparison report. Jerry and Chip have both mentioned the wheels. Certain of the team's reports are free, and typically these are reports that would go for anywhere from $30 to maybe $70. And once the data is in there, you're able to convert these reports.
Yeah. One of the other things that they have, because a lot of you got unlimited because you didn't want to have to think about how you were using the reports. And many of you started unlimited because you were using it as a marketing tool. So TTI doesn't have a unlimited, but they have a marketing tool that they sell for $5. So that's part of the reason, if you're using them as in a speech, if you're using them as a giveaway, it's very compatible. Again, it's not a dot for dot apple for apple comparison, but what we've looked at so far, I don't think you're going to see a major difference in how they do it versus your interaction with Intermetrics, whether it's unlimited or by report.
And one thing I do want to say is that I guess I was acculturated to TTI earlier, which said charge so much that you don't really care about the cost of the assessments, and that helped me ratchet up my pricing, and so whenever I do a project, a lot of the times I do like a $5,000 project, and it might include assessments, but I don't really care because I've charged enough to get beyond the cost of the assessments. So anyway.
We have a question from Mr. Carney.
Yes, thank you for sharing everything about this company. I think, Jerry, you said 40% of your business is from this. Can you expand on that? Is that just selling and working with these reports, or 40% of what you do includes some element of this?
It really is a mixture. I have never seen much difference between Trusted Advisors and TTI in terms of the way we approach the market. That it's a combination. We are not a commodity seller of assessments. We just don't sell hundreds and hundreds of assessments. Not our model. But one thing we do a lot of is job benchmarking, which either Chip or George mentioned a little about job benchmarking. Job benchmarking is the best thing that ever happened to an assessment, because now suddenly, if the job could talk, what would the job say it wants in terms of behaviors, motivators, and the attributes? And you can figure there's a methodology to figure that out. It's not complicated. And then once you've done that with a client and you've charged the client, $5,000 to do a benchmark or whatever it is, now you can sell assessments for their candidates, or maybe it's on an internal person that's being promoted and you want to see what's that job ahead of that person so you can benchmark the job. It's another whole revenue stream for all of you.
Yeah, and Jerry, George even mentioned it, that this is one of the few places where you can make money while you sleep. So if you get somebody that's a recruiter or in HR that can get certified, then it's just it's great, because then you don't have to do anything except bill them.
Exactly. I have 4 certified partners here in addition to myself. And so there's a lot of us that can go out and debrief an assessment, go out and do the same thing that you all are doing if you're working with the Intermetrics tool. That's very powerful, right? And then you can certify your clients. And so if you've got a big enough client that's going to use enough reports, you certify that person, and they become that internal. This is what MBTI does, right? they get these groupies, right, and they're following them down the road, and that's a way to do that, especially if it's a larger client, and so smaller clients, that don't have HR departments and so on, it's probably not a good idea, because they won't use reports to get proficient at it. Right?
And Brad, let me answer it in a different way, because assessments are part of everything I do. They're part of every coaching engagement I do. They're part of every class that I run. They're part of the selection process. So I may charge, I might make $50,000 or $60,000 a year in selection clients, but everything else, it's just a part of what I do. So, if I'm charging 10 grand for a coaching engagement, it's going to include the assessments. And so I don't even think about the cost of the assessments as much as this is part of what I do.
You exactly clarified what I was asking, and then I'm going to just throw a pitch. It sounds like benchmarking might be a good learning lab.
It's a hell of a learning lab.
It would be.
Good thought. We have a question from Cozy.
Hi everyone. My main question has to do with the reporting side. Would we be able to do the reporting where we get, say, I work with 20 people together and I can get their scores all put together so I can see it from a team perspective?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the way TTI does it is much more intuitive and seamless than what Intermetrics allows you to do, and you can do it with multiple options.
Gotcha. Thank you. One more question, real
Please.
quick. As far as the report going out to the client, are we able? Here previously, we've been able to go in, get 10 people set up. They go get everything done, and they have their report as an option. Is that an option that's going to be with the new guys, where If, you know, I'm having you take an assessment, and then it'll generate the report and make sure that you have it, so that when you arrive, wherever it is we're arriving, you already have your report with you.
Yes, every single, you have complete control over who gets a copy of that report. So if you want to send it just to the person that took it, or maybe it's a recruiting situation and you don't want that person to get the report, but you want the company that purchased the report to get it. If you want a copy of it, if you want to send a copy to another person in your organization, you have all of that flexibility through what they call their IDS system.
Their back-end system that Chip walked you through, now that we're learning more, it's very, very similar to Intermetrics, which is a good thing. Not a lot of learning, but much more sophisticated, much more intuitive, many more options than what we've had through Intermetrics. And I say that as a statement of fact, not a judgment. Arnie?
Thank you.
This is a question for the three guys doing TTI. I'm assuming now that as you are debriefing these reports to clients, you can't be doing it in person because of the COVID environment. I have discovered that I will never go back to debriefing a report in person because it's just so much easier to put it in a share and to be looking at somebody on a screen or even a few people. I just want to know if you found the same thing.
Yeah, well, I have. I can tell you, Arnie, that we've been virtual for 20 years, you know. I mean,
you don't count because you've been virtual for 20 years, right?
But to be
the
able
rest of us idiots that didn't figure that out, right?
Well, no, but I mean, it was out of necessity in some ways for us, and so that's what we did. Our partners are all over the place, so and our clients are too, for that matter. But you know, it is easy, and we send their reports out to them in advance, so they get a little time to begin to get through it and have some questions. Whether they believe it or they don't believe it, they certainly misinterpret information. There's no question. We almost always do a debrief. It is very rare when we don't do a debrief on an assessment we have sold.
Jerry, I should have been talking to you a long time ago. The more I listen to you, the more I figure out there's a lot you know. Thank you so much.
Well, and
Arnie, I'm not very computer savvy, but I don't think I've done a debrief in person in 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
It's always been virtual just because it's easier. And this can also be a group, a team debrief, or can also be a boss with a subordinate, or vice versa. Oh.
Okay.
Arnie, I'm one of those silly people that in 2019 I was on 96 airplanes. And that all came to a crashing halt. I was only on 6 last year, and March 7th was the last trip I took. So getting to the virtual world, I mean, Brown's been doing it for forever, but getting to the virtual world has been an interesting change for me. And all the debriefs have gone to virtual. All the classes that I'm running have gone virtual. And getting back to a previous question, one of the nice things is like the emotional intelligence assessment, the EQ, I don't like to give out to people before the seminar or before the morning. I don't want them to spend too much time ruminating on it. And so there's a thing, there's a checkbox in when you set up the link that says, I want to send all of the assessments at this particular time. So in other words, you can, you know, if the seminar is at 11, you can send the assessments to everybody at 10 o'clock. And let's face it, everybody is using iPads and that they're not using paper much anymore. And so, you know, that works for most people.
Can I pop in here? Tam, you mind?
Rick, go for it.
I've been with TTI for 17 years. I've been with Trusted Advisors as well. I'm not as astute or as well versed in it as the other gentleman, but I do a lot of in person. We're in San Antonio, and I've got 17. I'll run a class of 17 to do a live debrief. My strength is in front of people, so we run it and we make it a fun class. And I've run up to 65 at one time, doing an in-person debrief, high level. but I did it for a group engineering firm last year or year before, I guess now. I forgot, 2020. But you can do it in person. For those who know, the virtual thing makes it easier. I think it's virtual. We've had to learn to adapt to be virtual, but it's made it easier for us as well because hell, I need all the cheat sheets I can get. And I probably Jerry and George can and Chip can attest. It's good to have a cheat sheet when you're doing these, and it just works. I'm a big fan of TTI, and all my clients get it. They get an assessment right away. We even do EQ. I'm fixing to do an EQ debrief with 6 or 7 people tomorrow. So great tool.
So we're at the 5 o'clock hour. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm getting some chats that people have to drop off because they have another appointment. Our objective, again, was to give you the opportunity to pick these 4 folks' brains with Rick's added comments. If it generates additional questions, how it affects you and you personally, reach out to Wendy Gerard or I, and we'll help you with that. It is our objective to the question at the beginning of the call. Between the end of this week and the beginning of next week, you'll start, getting pricing. You'll start getting the opportunity to see samples of the report. So we'll be packaging information once we know it's solid, and you'll start getting emails from us as it relates to the details and the specifics. So any closing thoughts or questions?
If I could just add
Tammy,
one
this
comment.
is,
Sandy?
yeah, just a quick question, actually for George. A number of us put contact information in the chat box that we're interested in being part of the Wednesday group. Is that sufficient? Did George get it, or do we need to do something else, or somebody else do something else?
What I was thinking about is I have 5 names, and I was going to forward them to Gerard, and then he forward my contact information to you. So I have Nancy, Sandy, Chuck, Janelle, and Jennifer. If there's other people, please let Gerard or Wendy or Tammy know, and they'll give you my contact information, and then I'll send out the information. The next one is next Wednesday.
George, you don't even have to worry about sending me that text or email. I already text Jenna, who is my awesome little helping friend that's a lot more detail oriented than me, to keep a track on that. So I've got all that information. George, if that's what you want to do, I will send your information to them in the next 48 hours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. You're so on the ball.
We try, brother.
The other thing I was going to say is make sure you check your weekly emails as well, because we may be sending things in the weekly emails. I know sometimes you don't necessarily open every weekly email, but pay attention to them.
And just as a final, effective February 28th is the agreed date that trusted advisors will no longer be able to help you with anything that has Intermetrics on it. That is the final transition date. So just make whatever decision is best for you. Hopefully we're putting together a platform that you find even more valuable, but don't procrastinate on this one, because we will not have any leverage after February 28th to help you with anything Intermetrics. Thank you, George and Chip and Jerry, for making this time. Thank you for your supportive comments. Rick, hope it was helpful. Specific information, reach back out to us. Thanks for your time today, and have a good evening or afternoon, depending upon where you live.
It's 72 degrees in Arizona, just in case you're wondering.
Thank you.
No, we don't care, Jerry.
You're so kind, Jerry.
73 in Florida.
65 in the Bay Area.